Welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin, and I'm joined by my dear friend and co-host, Dr. Sylvia Bank. Between our two households, we're navigating life with 10 children, so we know how chaotic parenting can be. As Johns Hopkins trained pediatricians, we also know the science. Our goal is to bring you the best of both worlds, medically sound, trustworthy advice, and practical, real-world insights as we dive into the trials and triumphs of parenting. Please note this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor. So Sylvia, what are we talking about today?
So today we're talking about night terrors, sometimes also called sleep terrors, which is different than nightmares.
I would say if you have never seen a night terror, I would picture like a nightmare, right? We know what that looks like. A child wakes up like after having this really vivid, scary dream and they're like screaming and upset. Well, a night terror can look like that. They're like screaming and upset, but they are not awake. They're not waking up. Even if you try calling their name and talking to them, they're not waking up. And that's because night terrors occur at a different stage of sleep. Nightmares occur at REM sleep, which usually happens later in the night. Night terrors occur at deep sleep, which is non-REM sleep, and usually occurs earlier in the night. So night terrors tend to occur earlier in the night. So Sylvia, I'd love for you to describe for our listeners, because when we just talk about it in the office, I think people often don't have like a picture of how this can look. So do you have examples? Can you tell us what
Sure.
this looked like?
Yeah, so one of my children suffered from night terrors. And maybe the first one that we saw was around toddlerhood, where he was mobile, he was walking, he was quite agile. And we would put our children down. They had an earlier bedtime, so like around 7:30. And then somewhere around the 9 to 10 o'clock range, while we were still awake as parents, we were watching TV or downstairs doing something, we would hear this boom, like this crash. And our children slept above on the second floor. And then the first time it happened, I remember we went running upstairs like, what happened? What happened to our kid? And our child that was prone to night terrors was actually also very agile. His gross motor skills were very advanced. And as he was still asleep, experiencing the night terror, he would be running around the room. So it was a very active form of terror. In that running around, he was confused, eyes kind of slightly closed, slightly open, and he was screaming and basically terrified of something, as if someone was chasing him, something was pursuing him, and he was running around the room terrified. And the first time it happened, of course, we were very shocked and surprised. And initially, it took us a long time to calm him down. Sometimes it could take like 15 or 20 minutes just to kind of get him to settle down. My husband actually has some sleep disturbances as well. He's a sleep talker and a sleepwalker. So these types of sleep phenomenons are not unusual to him and our family. So both he and I knew that this was most likely a night terror, and he couldn't be comforted. Like, it was very hard to even touch him during this time. After 15, 20 minutes, he finally settled down, and then he went back to sleep.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. That sounds like that must have been like heart-wrenching.
Yes.
To watch your child be so terrified and not be able to do anything.
Yes, like he was screaming in pain, like something was hurting him. It was like an active terror, right?
I can also imagine that the first time it happened, it probably made your heart rate go up pretty fast. And I'm sure it took you a minute or two to like reassure yourself that everything was actually
right.
okay.
Like you look around the room, like, is someone in here? Like, what's going on in here? Like,
Right.
just orienting yourself. But honestly, it's very hard for me to think of them that way now, because they happened actually at quite an increased frequency in this child's toddlerhood, well into the school age years. So it became honestly part of our routine, where he would have probably a night terror once every other week.
Okay.
And sometimes there were things going on in our lives which made them more frequent, right? So it's something that we got actually really used to with this child.
Ooh, okay. So tell me about, what did you notice that made it more frequent?
So if he was about to get sick, it was almost like a preview, like he wasn't showing signs of illness yet, no fever, no runny nose. But then after the night terror, the next day, he would then show signs of illness. So sometimes if we had no other reason for increased, or he just had one last night, why is he having one tonight? Then we were kind of pretty sure he was about to get sick.
Oh, that's interesting. It was like the harbinger of what was to come.
Right. The other thing that would cause him to have night terrors is if he was low on sleep. If he had skipped a nap that day, or if he had stayed up late for some reason, like we were at a party, then we can almost predict that the next day or so he would have a night terror. And this actually forced us to continue the nap well into the preschool years for this child, because if he didn't nap, he would have a night terror. But if he did, he wouldn't. So we kind of figured it was probably healthier for him to nap. So this child actually napped until the day before he started kindergarten, right? He was napping every day because he could and he needed it. And as he got older, the frequency became less and less, where it was like a month would go by and then he wouldn't have one, or it would be less severe. We knew it was still related to the night terror, but it wouldn't be as loud and as terrifying as it was before. So that's kind of how the night terrors eventually tapered off.
Okay, and does he have any memory of this at all?
He does not remember a single night terror, but he remembers us talking about it, right? Like his memory of it is probably us commenting. And honestly, I have to admit, we actually did video him sometimes. And when he sees the video of it, he's like, no, I don't want to watch that. I don't want to see myself like that. It's more than just embarrassing.
It sounds like something out of a horror movie.
Yes.
I have this image in my mind that would just draw so much anxiety as a parent to watch.
They're not themselves. They're not awake. And knowing your child and not being able to snap them out of that state immediately can be very scary for parents, right?
Yeah. So I want to contrast this, what you've said, to what I experienced as a parent, because I had one child who was very prone to nightmares. And let me just describe that so it's very clear to people what it looks like and how it's different. So this child, he was prone to waking up in the middle of the night screaming in terror at the top of his lungs. And because of that, we kind of proactively positioned where he slept to a room that was like adjacent to ours. They were like kind of interconnected so I could leave the door open. And so he would wake up in the middle of the night. It was always dead middle of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So a different time. He would wake up shrieking in terror. I would always wake up tachycardic, right? Heart rate fast, like it sounds like somebody has just broken into the house. I would realize he was screaming. From my bed, I would scream his name at the top of my lungs multiple times. You are having a nightmare, wake up. He would, after 10, 15 seconds, hear me and be like, oh, okay. And then I would be like, do you need to come to me or can you go back to bed? And he would often be like, I'll just go back to bed. And then that would be it, right? And it would happen, once a week or twice a week or whatever. And he did eventually outgrow it. By the time he entered adolescence, he doesn't have that happen anymore. When did your son outgrow it?
Ooh, I want to say I remember one of his last night terrors, and it became milder and milder, like I described. And then there was one point when he was maybe in 4th or 5th grade, so he was like 9 or 10 years old, where he came down shortly after the school year started, which is a change of routine and the sleep is changed. And he just looked like really confused, not running around, not screaming, but he just wandered downstairs. And we started talking to him, and he was still in that semi-asleep, possessed state where he was just a little bit confused, and he was very suggestible, like people are when they sleepwalk, right? We were like, have a seat, buddy. So he's sitting there, and we're watching Monday Night Football. And at that point, my son was like this huge football fan. Like he prided himself in his football minutia knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. So we're watching football on, the TV. And my husband was like, who's the quarterback for, the Bills? Something that, in the waking state, my son would be like on it, facts, football, I know this stuff. And he's watching the TV and he's looking at him and he's like, I don't know. He couldn't access that conscious memory part of him. Part of him in that semi-awake state knew that he knows this fact, but it got him very upset that he couldn't answer. And then we're like, it's okay, let's just watch some more. And then after 10 minutes of so of watching TV, he was back. He could answer the football questions. He was making commentary on the plays on TV. And we're like, all right, go back to bed. So I think that was the last time he had a night terror. I think once he started middle school, which is around that puberty time, right? It ended and he didn't have any more as far as we knew, right?
Okay, that brings up an interesting point because we do know that about a third of the kids that have night terrors do go on to develop sleep talking or sleepwalking as part of it in childhood. Does your son do either of those now as an adult?
I'm not sure. It would probably be better to ask his college roommates, right? If he does those things. But on break, when he's here for Christmas or on vacation together, I don't see that happening at all. Like he doesn't
Yeah.
sleepwalk and he doesn't sleep talk as far as I know, right?
Right, which is also typical that often this is a thing of childhood, early childhood, goes away at the latest by adolescence. And for most kids, they don't go on to have what are called these parasomnias, right?
Right.
Sleepwalking, sleep talking, etc. Okay, well, that I feel like paints a really good description for our listeners of what a night terror can look like and how terrifying it can be for a parent to watch. What I'd like to do is let's transition to talking about what should we do if our child is prone to night terrors, and then like tips and tricks from you, because I can imagine you probably put some thought into planning for this so that it wasn't as disruptive or scary every
Right.
single time that it happened.
Sure.
Okay, so I just want to review for parents and listeners what healthychildren.org has to say about night terrors. During a night terror, your child might cry uncontrollably. They might sweat, shake, or breathe fast. They often have a terrified, confused, or glassy-eyed look. They might thrash around, scream, kick, or stare, or run like your child did. They will often not recognize you or realize you are there. And they may even like try to push you away if you try to touch them. So night terrors can last as long as 45 minutes, but most by far are much shorter. I think typically we're talking more in the like 5 to 10 to 15 minute range. Most children, when they're finished with the night terror, they fall right back to sleep because they actually never even woke up. So it's not like a nightmare where a child wakes up and they need to be consoled back down to go to sleep. The only person that needs consoling in the event of the night terror is the parent that witnessed it, right? Mm-hmm. They're probably the ones that have trouble going back to sleep. So what can you do? What's recommended that you can do as a parent? Well, first of all, stay calm. Children are unaware that it's going on. It's disconcerting for the parent, not for the child. Make sure your child cannot hurt themselves, especially if it's associated with sleepwalking. And a little plug, especially if it's associated with sleepwalking and there is a pool at your house. Like, make sure doors are locked. They cannot get outside for safety in general, but especially if there's a pool. Remember that after so many minutes pass, your child is probably going to relax and go right back to sleep. And then their final piece of advice is if your child is prone to night terrors, be sure to let your babysitters know that this happens and how to handle it and how to stay calm. If they keep happening, if you see this pattern that your child is just getting terrible sleep and night terrors is part of that, anything like this, then please talk to your child's doctor. So Sylvia, it's easy for me to rattle that off. As a parent going through it, and this was years of it happening with some regularity, what were your own personal hacks? How did you problem solve this one?
Yeah, like initially, as I described in the storytelling, it took a long time to get him to calm down. First step was let's stop running around and screaming. And then it evolved into a place where he could lie back down. And that could take 15 minutes for that to happen. Eventually, we got to this place where we heard the boom as he jumped out of bed, and we didn't both have to take care of it. We alternated. Oh, it's your turn. Oh, I'll go get him tonight. We knew what was going on. It wasn't a terrifying thing anymore because it was honestly almost part of our routine. And we got a couple of tricks in place that seemed to break the night terror faster than initially. So eventually, I think we got to a place where we could get him down in less than a minute.
Ooh.
Like very efficient addressing the night terror. And sometimes if it took longer, we knew, oh, he's about to get sick. It's a worse one, and there's something different about this night terror. So you get kind of good at reading your child's symptoms. So what we would do is he would be running around the room, terrified and screaming. We would turn the light on. Sometimes people are like, keep it dark, it irritates them. We would turn the light on, and transiently, sometimes there was a shock with the light, but we felt like that helped him kind of overcome the night terror sooner. Then a trick that used to work every time is we would take him to the bathroom. And it's really hard to take him to the bathroom because he's like thrashing and moving and, like you said, trying to get away from us. But we'd kind of hold him by the shoulders and wrestle him to the bathroom. And if we could get him to pee, like micturate or urinate in the toilet, that would break the night terror, for at least for my son, almost immediately. So he'd be like squirming and screaming and moving, and we'd be wrestling him to the toilet. And then we'd pull his pants down. He's trying to pull them up. And then we would be in his ear like, pee, pee now, pee, and trying to get him to pee. If he could pee, then the night terror was pretty much over. If we couldn't, obviously, if they don't have to go, they don't have to go. The second thing we would do as a replacement is that we would give him a drink of water. So, we would fill the cup with water and then hold it to his mouth, and we would say, drink, drink, getting something in his mind to say like, yes, I need to drink this water. And if he could drink in that swallowing, then the night terror would end sooner as well. So eventually we'd kind of bring him back to his room. He wouldn't be screaming and thrashing anymore. And we knew we could put him down if we looked at him and we said, who am I? And if he actually answered and said, your mommy, your daddy, then we knew we can put him back down and he wouldn't wake up again. Because there were times where we thought it was over, we put him down, and like 20 minutes later, he's back again. So like that confirmation that it's over, like my cognitive brain is now registering, I know who you are. And then sometimes we would be like, who are you? And then he would say his own name. But these questions could not be answered in the middle of the night terror. Like it would just be like shock looking at you and being like, ooh. So this is how we knew it was over enough that we could put him down and it wouldn't happen again. So I don't know if there's medical literature or studies about this, but those are the tips and tricks that we use to get him down quickly.
Yeah. I love that most likely those specific methods will work for a small percentage of children. Yeah. But you had the confidence to read your own child, try things and see if they worked or didn't work, and experiment with just knowing that all you had to do was be in the bounds of making sure your child was safe, right? Anything else, like if turning on the light elevates it and makes it worse, then don't turn on the light the next time. If trying to get them to go to the bathroom does not work at all, then don't do that next time. I mean, I think there's a freedom here of managing it for what works for your child as you study them and how they act in this situation. I think it's definitely worth a try. Eventually, he outgrew this and it became a thing of the past. It's like lore now. He was definitely a night terror and not a nightmare child, right? Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Well, do you have any other thoughts to leave our listeners with on night terrors? Yeah, so my stories in retrospect are, night terrors were something that my husband and I both knew about. When we experienced them, we knew that everything was okay, and we, as you mentioned, tried tips and tricks to try to make it end sooner. But I don't want to undersell how scary this can be for parents. Sometimes people will go to the emergency room for this. There's something wrong with my child. I will definitely see it in the office where it's enough of a stress for parents and they're at their wits' end at times and worried enough about their child that they'll bring it up at the well child visit. And, I'll share with them tips and tricks and obviously reassure all their resources they've researched have said that it doesn't lead to any other problems. But it can be very scary after a long day's work, spending 45 minutes additionally to bedtime to get your child down to sleep right after you've fallen asleep. That puts a stress and a toll on parents as well. Okay, well, this has been a fascinating discussion. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank. And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.